we got a little ditty to do for you today.
Here we are.
What did he
Sitting
mean
at
by that?
Northside with the fellas. Here we are with another podcast.
Welcome to our Veggie Tales podcast.
It's going to be a Veggie Tales weekend. So we had a really good, I thought the service was good this weekend. I enjoyed the topic that I got to preach on. I don't think it's preached on often, right?
Yeah, it was cool that you prequel going into Luke.
Yeah.
Gave everyone a break from John.
Everyone was very surprised at that, right?
I didn't know what to do with myself. I saw a different book of the Bible on the screen, and I was just so confused.
Right?
Do you know there's actually 66 of these things?
66
You're
of these
kidding.
books, yes. But I loved the temptation. I think, what I really wanted people to understand is I wanted them to have a feeling. I wanted them to experience a feeling of, what I was trying to communicate to them is I wanted them to have a feeling of ease instead of performance, recognizing that Christ is our substitute. But I think that led or could have led to some confusion too.
Yeah. Again, with that text, right? I think the temptation is to go to that text and say, this is how I defeat temptation in my life.
Yes.
While you were explaining that the primary reason is Jesus being our substitute.
Yeah.
So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I had someone actually ask me about it after. So I really had to think through the best way to communicate it because it's not an easy thing to communicate. Because the reality is that Christ is our example. So that is a true statement.
Yeah.
Christ is our example. Christ is our substitute. He is both those things. Mm-hmm. What I was trying to communicate, and I hope that maybe this helps to clear it up, is that if we are using Christ as our example for redemption, that leads to legalism.
Yeah.
He's our substitute when it comes to the redemptive nature of who God is.
Right.
We are not redeemed by following Christ's example and being holy. We are redeemed because Christ is our substitute. Mm-hmm. And in that, it's a principle thing. It's a primary thing. Like first we need redemption, right? But then the Bible calls us to be holy, like I am holy. Yeah. And as so it's as a redeemed person, we follow his example in holiness. Yeah. So the gentleman that came up to me after was kind of confused with the legalism statement. Well, it's legalistic to think that we can be holy enough to be saved.
Yep.
Christ is our substitute for salvation,
yes,
principally. But then as someone that has already received the gift of salvation from God and been rescued from our sin, now Christ becomes our example. And so we need to think first in the temptation narrative. The principal idea of the temptation narrative is that he is restoring the lost standing of man that happened in the garden, and you see a reversal of the garden. That's salvation. But as a saved person now, we can stand and say, this is how Christ defeated the wiles of the enemy and the world and the flesh that he struggled with. I wanted people to get that too, the idea that Christ was true man.
Mm-hmm. I think that was a really important message to preach, because I think sometimes, even as Christians that know the gospel, I think it gets a little muddled, because I think we get this idea in our heads that our striving is holier than just resting in what Christ has accomplished for us. And I think it's easy to get sidetracked.
Yeah.
I was reading a book recently, and one of my favorite parts from it says, when you look at sin as victory and not obedience, you're in the wrong, because you start thinking, I'm getting victory over sin. It's all about me and what I can accomplish, as opposed to being, I'm obedient to the Lord.
Yes.
And Tozer says something about when the church calls obedience legalism, we're at the greatest source of heresy. And we're not, obviously we're called to obey, we're called to be holy,
Yep.
but that doesn't gain our favor with the
Yeah,
Lord.
legalism. It's a very misrepresented idea in the church because you have grace people that anytime someone wants to be holy, they're saying everyone's a legalist. And it's like, no, like holiness is part of it too.
Yeah.
You know, we are called to be holy. Legalism is when our holiness begins in our mind or our heart to be a means by which we're justified before God.
It's our attitude towards the holiness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we giving the glory to God, or are we saying, look at what I'm doing, I can start to accomplish, like our attitude and our heart towards it are like, hey, maybe I'm the one succeeding over sin.
Yeah.
And I really like what Chris was saying with, if you look at sin as victories rather than obedience, you start giving yourself the tally marks rather than giving it over to the Lord.
Yeah, and our whole it's both and. Our holiness is and righteousness is first and foremost in the accomplishment of Christ through faith.
Yeah.
That now be holy as I am holy.
Yeah.
Now he's called me, and me trying to be holy and striving for holiness in that mindset and that perspective is not legalism. That's what the Bible calls sanctification.
Yeah.
It calls us to strive for holiness.
That's the
Not
Holy Spirit at
holiness
work in
that
your life.
saves us, but holiness that honors and glorifies God and not ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I have to say, no one asked me about the part of the message that I thought was, to me, when I thought of it, it was like, wow, this really blows my mind. But the fact that Jesus had to stand in faith.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I mean, to me, when I think of the fact that Jesus in those moments was true man and believing God's word about him, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased, I'm like, wow, it changes the way I look at faith because it's hard for me sometimes in recognizing that was not easy for Jesus. I think the point that I was trying to make is it was a real temptation. Like, we can't gloss over the fact that he wasn't really tempted to these things.
Yeah.
I don't think we're ever really going to be able to fully get it, because when you look at it, when you break it down to basics, it is God surrendering his trust to God.
Right?
It's like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, it's so hard to understand. Yeah. But just the idea that in faith he was saying, no, I'm gonna go through the cross. In faith, he was saying, I'm going to be rejected by men. I mean, you got to know he was looking at the Old Testament, right, and saying, man of suffering, man of sorrows.
Yeah.
He knew he was going to the cross. He knew the purpose and the mission was for him to die and give up himself, and that's why he was hiding it from people, because he didn't want to be turned into an earthly king. When you think of that and the obedience and the faith it had to take to do that, it kind of helps you think, man, I can follow that example. See, he is our example.
I was challenged by the in faith thing last night. I was reading in the Bible, and I came into 1 Thessalonians when that church was known because of their faith. And I shared it with the discipleship group I'm in. And it reminded me of the words of Paul to Timothy, set believers an example in faith and conduct and love and purity. And then I was like, what does the in faith mean? Right?
Yep.
Like, I feel that, again, our example, and that challenged my heart. How can I live a life of faith, in faith? Like, we have our faith in Jesus, but how do I live my life in faith that God's going to come through, or God's know the truths of God and live that way?
And that goes to the question, because people will say, well, why does God allow suffering? Or even the beginning of the message, the Spirit led him into the wilderness, and people are saying, well, you're saying God's going to lead us into wilderness? Why does God want to give us? Because faith isn't faith outside of suffering and trial and patience.
Yeah.
If you don't need to be patient about something, if you're not having difficulty, and if your life is just easy peasy and no suffering, nothing you have to wait for, nothing you have to work towards, there's no faith.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the reality of our faith becomes most clear and most tested in times of patience. And you see that all through the temptation narrative. Jesus had to not take the easy route and to go and to wait.
Yeah.
And to follow the plan of God, or suffering or trial or difficulty. That's when faith becomes faith.
Yeah. I think back to the temptation of Jesus, and it really reminds me, like, I think it's one of the greatest examples of being the new Adam, like original Adam, he failed, he fell into sin, and we are all of the line of Adam, and now Jesus, like, going through those same temptations that Adam failed in, succeeded in them. And when we are reborn again in Christ, we now are of the new line of Adam.
Right.
And they are pretty much the same kind of temptations too, when you think about it. Because like when you look at how Adam was tempted, it was because Satan was saying, "Oh no, God doesn't want you to eat this tree because when you eat the fruit, you're going to be like God, and you're going to have this wisdom and this authority." And then here he's saying to Jesus, "Look, I can give you this authority right now."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take it now. You can have it right now.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's earthly. It's,
Right.
You don't have to go through the suffering.
You don't have to go through the suffering. You don't have to be patient. I think patience, I mean, if you look at every single one of those temptations, was a call to patience.
Yeah.
Wait and patience, trust in God's timing, trust in God. And none of us, I'm the first one. I don't want to be patient.
Yeah.
I'm like so far from patient.
Oh,
but
there's an option where I could do it when I want to do it rather than,
Right?
than have to wait on someone else.
yeah.
Or wait
yeah.
on God.
I think something else that we didn't really touch on this week when we're talking back to like Jesus being true man as well as true God is the fact that angels came after the temptation and ministered to him.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
in that, so I think that's a really striking image because again, here's God the Son being ministered to
Yep.
by angels. So I think that's just a really it speaks to even the severity of the temptation. Like we think we experience severe temptation.
Yeah.
Like here is like I said, the second person of the Trinity being ministered to after being tempted.
And I think Luke even makes a statement where Luke says at the end, it says after the devil had tempted him in every other way. It's like we're getting like some of these temptations, but there's even more.
Yeah, and
Like,
when the devil had ended every temptation,
Yeah.
he departed from him until an opportune time.
Yeah, so-
Again, he's coming to get, and it continues temptation. He's
Yes.
coming back to
Yeah.
tempt him to a better time.
and if Christ is tempted in every way, in such a manner, like Xander said, where he hasn't eaten for 40 days, he's probably sleeping horribly. Life is not easy just alone in the wilderness. He doesn't have anyone to talk to other than prayer to the Father. He's completely isolated, completely alone, completely hungry, probably tired, worn down. The devil is just battering him with every temptation he could possibly have, to such point that, like you said, like the angels needed to come and minister to him, you know?
I also find it very interesting too. Like these temptations, at no point did Jesus say like, you don't have the power to give me that, which means that like the rule of authority over the earth and everything, that he had the power to give that to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's like, and it hasn't changed. Like still has the power of the earth until
Yeah.
Jesus' return.
And someone had made a statement to me after the 9 o'clock. Someone came up to me and said, think of that for a second. Not only is it the kingdoms of the earth, but it's all the authority and the fame and the power
Yeah.
and all that comes along with being that
Yeah.
ruler of the world. And in a moment, the all the food you want, all the women you want, the sex you want, the every temptation that we all go through, the fame, the power, the prestige, it was all just blasted in front of his eyes in a moment. And how many of those things do we fall to every day? And he rejected it all. Even you got to think he's in a weakened state mentally.
Just the one fact of not eating for 40 days.
right.
Like you hear that and you're like, oh yeah, Jesus didn't eat for 40 days. And then I'm like, when was the last time I haven't ate for like one day?
Yeah.
And just when you're hungry, where that even brings you,
Right.
40 days.
Yeah, so I'm glad some people came up and talked to me after and actually said, I want to submit a question to. What did he
Oh, that's
mean by
great.
that?
Oh, I love that.
Then he submitted. So if you have questions,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
he can. He submitted it through the website. He asked Chris, and then there's a form on the website that says connect with us. So if you fill out that form with a question, it'll get to us.
Yeah, and really I want everyone that's listening to this to know that, like, the purpose of this podcast is, what did I say that didn't make sense on the weekend? Let us know. We want to clarify it. We want it to make sense. And I would also encourage you, share this podcast with other people in the church, because I don't think everyone in the church knows that we have it yet. If you got teenagers that listen to the podcast, give it to them. I would love to get teenagers, young adults, everyone involved in asking questions about what we're talking about on the weekend. Maybe it's something that I was unclear of. Maybe it was something you want me to expand on. But, we want this to be a resource to dig deeper into the Word for all the people at Northside Church over the week after the weekend service. So go ahead and share it.
Let's do it. Until next time.